Hi, boys and girls. This week we are going to be starting a new writing unit, and we're going to be working on this for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. And we are going to be focusing on writing a letter, and then within your letter, we're going to be doing some research on some natural wonder or something in nature that you are interested in. So we're going to start out today by just talking about what our focus statement is and reading a text that will help be a guide for us to understand what we need to do in our writing. So this focus statement is Earth's natural wonders can teach us a great deal. Okay, so what this means is that when we go out in nature and we visit different places, that we can learn a great deal from nature. We are going to read a text today called Coral Reefs. And as we read Coral Reefs, and at the end of Coral Reefs, I'm going to give you an assignment. But as we read, I want you to think about where is somewhere you have gone, and what are some things in nature that interest you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read this text together. So if we look at the cover, what do you see as we look at the cover here? Well, it's a little interesting, right? Because it looks like it's underwater. I see the title says Coral Reefs, but then in the background, I see a building. Well, that's weird. I see a building over here, and I see a billboard and another building down here in the corner. So I'm wondering why there's a building under the ocean or in the water, and I'm assuming it's the ocean because I see a shark, I see a sea turtle, I see some coral reefs down here, but then I see a girl here floating in the middle as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the page. And we see here some different creatures or animals that might live in the ocean. So we see pictures of them, and they're not necessarily pictures. It's not like someone took a picture of it with a camera. It looks more like a drawing, like a pencil sketch. So that's interesting. And then underneath each of them, it says what it is, and then it gives a measurement. So like the jellyfish says 6 to 16 inches. The blue chromis is 3 to 4 inches. Great hammerhead shark, 5 to 14 feet. So that's interesting, right? All right, let's keep going. All right, so this looks like the same girl from the cover, and she's getting the Coral Reef book off of a shelf. And the background looks like she might be in a library. So I think this might be about a girl doing some research about the coral reef or reading more about the coral reef from a book that she's gotten from the library. So let's go ahead and let's read this together.
For more than 400 million years, corals have been building reefs in the Earth's oceans. Corals may look like plants, but they are actually animals. Some are soft and sway back and forth in the water, while others, called hard corals, are rigid. Corals are made up of polyps, and most have hundreds of tiny polyps on their surface. Each polyp has stinging tentacles that it can extend to catch food. The polyps of hard corals build a limestone skeleton and live in indentations, or cups, along its surface. When a polyp is in danger, it can retract into its cup for protection. Hard corals are able to build their skeletons because of a remarkable partnership that they have with a type of algae. The algae live inside the polyp, and, working together, the polyp and the algae build the coral's skeleton.
Okay, so something that we notice when we read these first 2 pages is that the author defines coral reefs right at the beginning of the text. Okay, so the reason why the author does this is because corals are going to be important for us to know about later in the text. And we know that this is going to be important because That's the title of our book. So when we are reading about a specific thing in nature, it's important for us to define what that thing is right away in our writing. All right, let's go on to the next page.
There are thousands of kinds of coral, and each species has a different shape and color. Some have intricate branches, while others grow in mounds on the ocean floor. When a coral's polyps die, they decay, but the skeleton remains, and new corals can grow on top of it. Over hundreds of years, the coral piles up and spreads across the seafloor, eventually forming a living mountain called a coral reef. Corals may be small, but they are incredible builders. Coral reefs are the largest structures built by any animal on Earth. The Belize Barrier Reef is over 180 miles long.
Okay, so as we read, it's important for us to revisit some of the interesting words that we encountered in our reading. And remember, we've talked about going back and asking ourselves questions to make sure that we understand what we're reading. So if we look at this page, we have some interesting words here. We know that they have intricate branches, right? So the author is describing the corals in depth so that we can visualize what they are talking about. We see the word polyps. So that's a vocab word that specifically relates to coral. That would be important for us to know. It also talks about how they decay and a skeleton remains. So these are all very interesting words and things that allow us to visualize what's going on with these corals.
Coral reefs are home to thousands of plants and animals. There are so many species living in reefs that they are often called the cities of the sea.
Okay, also as we read, it's important for us to look at the illustrations of the book as well. So these are illustrations. We see all different kinds of animals. We see an octopus, we see a stingray, we see different fish of different species. I see a swordfish back here and a sea turtle. So the illustrations within this book are actually helping us learn about the coral reef as well. Up here, these are the corals, okay? Even though they're illustrations and not pictures of those animals or the coral, we're still able to learn by the pictures that we see in the book as well.
These aquatic cities grow in tropical waters around the world. They start close to shore and extend out into the ocean. Different parts of the reef have different kinds of animals. All of these animals interact in a complex web of relationships, and each has its own place in the system. Many of the relationships are between predator and prey. Corals eat plankton, tiny organisms that float through the water. The polyps use their tentacles to catch the plankton so they can eat it. But corals aren't just predators, they are also prey. Coral polyps retreat into their cups for protection, but that can't stop parrotfish. Parrotfish eat the algae that live inside the coral polyps. They use their special beaks to break through coral skeletons and gobble up the polyps inside. The chain doesn't stop there. Parrotfish are preyed on by larger fish, like groupers and sharks. A series of species that eat each other, like the coral, parrotfish, and sharks, is called a food chain. There are many different food chains on the reef, and all together, they make up the food web.
All right, so we're introduced to some more vocabulary words here that are important for us to know. In this first paragraph, it talks about predator and prey. And through this, we are able to determine what predator and prey are. So predators are things that hunt or eat other things, and those other things that they eat are called the prey. We're also introduced to some vocab words over here like food chain. Okay, so the food chain is the chain of how things are consumed, right? So, and that has to do with predator and prey as well.
Many species use the reef for protection. As the coral grows, it creates many cracks and crevices in the reef that make perfect hiding places for small fish. Squirrelfish use the reef for protection when predators, like the Nassau grouper, are on the prowl. In addition to evading predators, each species must also find food to survive. Moray eels have slender bodies that are perfectly adapted for navigating the narrow nooks and crannies of the reef. Hiding fish may be safe from groupers, but they still have to watch out for hungry morays.
All right, so you can see as our text progresses, we're getting more and more detailed illustrations as well of the animals that live on the reef and the coral themselves.
The sandy area between the reef and the shore is called the lagoon, and it is covered by beds of seagrass. The lagoon plays an important role in keeping the reef healthy. Pufferfish and seahorses are common in the lagoon. Many young fish take shelter in the seagrass before growing up and moving on to the reef. Rays visit the lagoon to hunt for shrimp and snails, and sea turtles eat the seagrass itself. Beyond the lagoon, corals start to appear, marking the beginning of the reef. Groups of fish, called schools, can be found swimming over the reef. Fish swim in schools for protection, and sometimes different species, such as white grunts and porkfish, will swim together to make an even bigger group. By working together, schooling fish have a better chance at survival. Many species have developed unusual adaptations that help them survive. The scorpionfish barely resembles a fish, as it sits on the seafloor, waiting to ambush its prey. Predators had better watch out too. On its back are spines, filled with a painful venom, an effective defense. The frogfish goes fishing for its dinner. It changes color to blend in with its surroundings, and dangles a special fin in front of its mouth to lure its prey close. When an unsuspecting fish takes the bait, the frogfish attacks, and it rarely misses. The frogfish is one of the quickest fish in the ocean. The common octopus has a few uncommon adaptations. It can change the color and the texture of its skin to blend in with any environment. Being a master of disguise is perfect for hunting and hiding. If a predator does happen to find it, the octopus has a backup plan. It releases a cloud of ink that confuses its enemy. The scorpionfish, the frogfish, and the octopus are just a few of the many reef species with unique adaptations that aid in their survival. Sometimes, different species work together to help each other survive. Many large predators, like tiger groupers, have a partnership with tiny fish called neon gobies. The groupers visit the gobies for a cleaning. The gobies swim all over their customers, picking parasites and dead skin off their scales, gills, and fins. The groupers even let the gobies swim inside their mouths to clean their teeth. This arrangement works out well for everyone. The gobies get a free meal, and the groupers get a cleaning. At the end of the reef, the coral drops off dramatically into the depths. This is the reef wall, and beyond it is the open ocean. The tropical waters bordering reefs have very little life in them. making food scarce. Coral reefs, on the other hand, are like oases in the desert. They are teeming with life and provide feeding grounds for visitors. The largest fish in the world, the whale shark, visits the Belize Barrier Reef every spring to feed on the microscopic eggs of spawning reef fish.
Maybe we'll go to the next page. Okay, so while this is loading, let's go ahead and we're going to make a list of the important vocabulary words or things that vocab words or words specific to coral or coral reefs that stick out to us. Okay, so maybe it's just my Chromebook that's slow. Okay, so we know that we were introduced to coral reefs. We saw words like food chain, when they were talking about the food chain, they specifically talked about like the web of the food chain, talked about predators and prey. It talked about the coral reef being a shelter. It talked about specific animals, right? So it talked about the whale shark, right? Whale shark. It talked about that grouper that has those little neon fish come up and clean it. It talked about how the coral reef is protection for smaller fish, okay? And that it's a good hunting ground for larger animals. Okay, so we've picked out some keywords now, and these all are relating to our bigger idea or bigger topic of coral reefs. So now, what you are going to do for your assignment today, we're just going to end our book there because it's not loading. There was only one more page left. Okay, so can I do a new? I want to go back and do a new one. What you are going to do now is you are going to brainstorm. And you're going to brainstorm just like we did. Well, we took from the text these words and these concepts about coral reefs. But now what you're going to do is you're going to think about a place in nature that you have visited, and it can even just be the woods in your backyard or going to the trails at Falls Park. Okay. But what kinds of things do you see? Has your experience been at that place in nature? If I can get a new one to pull up, I will do an example for you. This is not something you're going to turn into me, but something that you're just going to keep, and it's going to help you pick a topic for your writing that we are going to start on later this week. Okay, so somewhere that I have visited that I'm going to refer to is Glacier National Park. Okay, Glacier National Park. And when I think about when I visited Glacier National Park, it's in Montana. And there were mountains all around me. I made snowballs in the middle of July. The lakes that were there were incredibly blue. There were waterfalls. There were colorful flowers. I saw birds, mountain goats, and even a grizzly bear. Okay, so what you're going to do now for your assignment for today is just on a piece of paper that you have at home. You can even open a Google Doc if you want to do that on a Google Doc. But you are going to think of a place in nature. Like I said, it could even be the trails at Falls Park or your backyard. And I want you to think about and write down some things that you see, maybe some sounds that you hear, and describe those things. So if I were to talk about the park, Falls Park, I might talk about the rushing water or that there's a waterfall. When you go in the trails, then there are different birds. So maybe you see a cardinal, bright red cardinal. So you're just going to write down those words of things that you hear, see, think about when you are in that place in nature. It's not something that you need to turn into me, but something that you need to save, because later in the week, we're going to revisit this list and it's going to help you in picking a topic for you to write about. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.